Hello and welcome to part 12. This will be the final part of this playthrough stream of Walden, a game that we've been doing. The first 8 parts covered the first year, or the main part of the game. Parts 9, 10, and 11 were a journey into the second year to finish up a lot of the odd jobs and other tasks. And then part 12, I'm just going to kind of summarize some thoughts here and, kind of wrap up this whole series. So I want to say a few things. First of all, at the end of part 11, it had been my hope that I would be able to just kind of wrap up the last couple of achievements for the game by earning Walden Millionaire, I think it's called, Walden Millionaire, which was earning $100, and then, paying the back taxes and supporting your family with the bills. And then, of course, the Sojourner Trophy of walking 50 miles. However, the game was apparently bugged and did not trigger. Not only did I go past $100, but I went to $150 before finally giving up. And I did let the developers know that has, a lot of people seem to have trouble getting that to trigger at $100. So what I did was I just started a fresh playthrough and went for the Walden Millionaire. And let me tell you, they designed the game on purpose to make that, a really not fun task, right? Like, the idea of working for money and just kind of going through that drudgery is intentionally uninspiring, and it really shows when you are only going after the money in the game. That said, you can earn $100 before winter even sets in, right? Before the last day of late fall, which I was able to do. So it didn't even require a full playthrough to get. Sojourner was a bit longer. It was a full, I started working on Sojourner in the winter of that playthrough so that you can skate on the ice and move a bit quicker. And it took me until the beginning of the following summer. I think it was actually fall, the following year, when I finally managed to hit the 50-mile mark and got the platinum for the game. I also, of course, used that money to purchase those last 2 achievements. Anyways, on the achievement side of things, the 2 biggest grinds are Walden Millionaire and Sojourner. And as I said, Walden Millionaire, if you're just going after that, you can do it in a shorter amount of time. However, this is all just trophy hunter, achievement hunter talk. That's a fun part of the game for me and for, some people who play games. Other people could care less. So there are more important things to talk about when we talk about Walden. And one of those things is we kept a running list throughout our stream of all the species that we encountered. Speaking of which, right now we can hear those spring keepers, which I don't think we certainly never saw one in the game, but we can hear them. And this is one of several sounds that I've heard in the game. The sound designer, Michael Sweet, put sound recordings from the Walden Pond area into the game, and it may be the case that not all of them are actually animals you can find, zoom in and get a passage from the book about, which is interesting. So I'm also curious to learn in the future, how many total animals, plants you can find in the game, and then how many sounds you can hear, things you can't actually discover with your eyes. I'm also hoping that sometime in the future, if this channel has enough interest from people watching, to do another playthrough of this game in the future with some people who are either directly involved with the Thoreau Society or Thoreau Scholars, or perhaps even somebody from the dev team or somebody who worked on Walden, just to be able to go through a playthrough with somebody who's a lot more knowledgeable. As I was doing the fresh playthrough to get those last couple achievements, at the time, I was also playing a YouTube video of Tracy Fullerton, the lead designer at USC Games, talking about her inspiration for the game and how it got off the ground, a video from about 10 years ago on YouTube. Really interesting stuff. I thought it was really funny. She talks about being at Walden Pond herself and then walking into the Thoreau replica cabin, across the street in the parking lot, to today, and the time that she was there, she kind of had the pond to herself, and she walked into the replica cabin, and she ran into Richard Smith, who was, you know, uh, doing his reenactment of Thoreau, and he sort of closed his book and was like, hello, traveler, and struck up a conversation with her, and I thought that was cool, and it reminded me of all the wonderful people in the Concord area and all of the wonderful Thoreau scholars, the people who go there every year in July around Henry's birthday for the annual gathering in the Thoreau Society. Just a wonderful group of people, and I thought maybe one of these days I can get one or two of them to join in the stream and share more historical behind-the-scenes kind of information. So that would be a fun project, that I would love to do in the future if it becomes possible. Some final thoughts that I have about the game. I've already shared many of the things that I think are wonderful, and I've also shared a couple of things I wish were slightly different. Of course, I'm glad that this game exists, period, but, I've suggested a couple little things. I wish there was a mode where you could sort of toggle limited resources, where you can't just, spam the food that you want from certain bushes. There is, I'm reminded there is a certain version of that, where, you only can draw from certain plants at certain times of the year, right? So the smooth sumac is a great plant that you can draw from for most of the year, but you even that one you can't get food from all year. You do have to pay attention to the seasons and learn where sources of food are in different places depending on what time of year it is. The middle of summer is very bountiful. The middle of winter is not. So there's a version of that. I do wish I like building games. I like the kind of survival game where you have to build shelters and craft things. Building is one of my favorite parts of games like that. So the cabin construction that happens at the beginning, it happens so quickly, and then it's just sort of maintaining the integrity of the building through the rest of the game. I know that technically this would be a whole other, set of obstacles for the devs, but I would love to have seen, the ability to actually construct it in a bit more detail. Things like making the fishing just a bit more interactive. That was some feedback that I heard from a friend, the fishing, is sort of a one-button thing. There isn't any sort of mini-game involved. And things like that could certainly improve the game. And, of course, because the game kind of goes for almost like a painterly realism, Tracy Fullerton kind of referred to it as almost like a romantic realism. Which changes, depending on your inspiration. The colors are fuller and more intense and so on. Because it is already somewhat farther on the spectrum towards photorealism than cartoony or, unrealistic, it would be nice to see a future update of the game that, made the textures and environments even more photorealistic if that were ever possible. But I know that's a big ask. And just being able to explore more of the world would be great. Once you've played enough of the world, it's like, I would like to see a more historically accurate Concord, to see how the buildings were laid out and learn more about the historic buildings in the town. That's something that's fun for visitors of Concord who go there, right? I would like to see, it would be really cool if the actual walk between Emerson's house and the cabin was through the actual path that it takes, because you'd walk by a place, Brister Spring is on the way, which is a place that was significant to me, and there's a pond along the way as you're headed towards Emerson's house. It's a really beautiful natural area as well. There's just a lot more to explore in the Concord area than the game, gives us. So basically what I'm saying is I would love to see more, always more, and I love it for what it is, but you can't help but wishing, I want to see more of this world. And having said all that, of course, I absolutely love the game still. And I'm so grateful for the team that made it a reality. It's such an unlikely game to be made. I'm grateful to Tracy for her vision and for pushing through to the end, and for all of the dedicated team members that started out as Tracy was saying in this YouTube video, as a volunteer project, really, until it got funding. And so I'm grateful for all the hours and the love that people put into making this real. I would also love to see, I learned from that video that the species of plants and animals that are included in the game were based not on, a biological survey of the area, but on what Henry actually writes about in the book, which is a very cool touch. Because in a sense, this is an artistic recreation through the mind of Thoreau, rather than like us visiting a historical Concord, right? This is what Henry saw and what he paid attention to and what he wrote about in his book. That's why you get these passages as you look at each species and so on, right? So, but that being said, it would be fun to be able to see even more of the things that he wrote about, say, only in his journal rather than in Walden, right? So there's a whole lot more wildlife here in the real Concord area in his time, that more species that we could have discovered and so on. So that would be great, and I would love to have seen more of the journal itself. I know it's called Walden and it's based on that book, but the thing that makes me love Thoreau and come back to him time and time again is his journal. Walden feels like a spin-off project from that, and not really, in my opinion, the best spin-off project. The journal is where all of the magic happens. There are a couple small passages that appear to be from the journal and not from Walden, but for the most part, everything is drawn from that book, so that would be cool to see more of too. One thing I was doing when I was doing the Millionaire and Sojourner playthrough was I also turned on alternate music, right? So Michael Sweet's music is wonderful, but it can be really game-changing, pun intended, to put on different music, put on something that either chimes with the game or just gives you a different vibe as you walk through the world. So, on PlayStation, you're able currently to do that with a Spotify playlist, so you can play through your music, or you can plug in a USB drive and play your own soundtrack to go along with it. As I was working on the Walden Millionaire, for example, I was playing lots of songs that were really critical of capitalism and being a wage slave and sort of just working for a living, and some ironic humor there. And then just some really beautiful soundtrack music from other things. So once you've really had a chance to appreciate and enjoy the soundtrack that comes with the game, it's also fun to kind of play with what different resonances different music will have with the environment. I also want to remind everyone, of course, the obvious fact that my playthrough in the first 11 videos is my playthrough. This is not your playthrough. This is an example of how you might play it. But one of the things Tracy was emphasizing in that video was that this game was designed to challenge your own perception of how you should spend your time, right? Do you seek inspiration, or do you just fix up your cabin and look for food and do what you need to do? And how much time are you willing to sort of spend just enjoying and appreciating the environment versus doing the things that you need to keep your health up and so on? How you balance that time, what you discover in the world, is entirely up to you, and that's the fun of the game, right? There will never be a definitive playthrough of Walden, and that's one of the things that's kind of special about it. Lastly, I want to go back through the list that we have compiled in this playthrough and just review. I hope to publish a blog, and when I do, the details of that will be on this YouTube channel, so you can visit the blog to see the species list, not only from Walden, but from every game that I play. I'll keep a physical list of all the species that we meet, of plants and animals and so forth, and put those in one place where you can kind of see, compare your own lists if you are interested in keeping one, or just see the sheer number and variety of different forms of life that you can encounter in these games. But in our playthrough, one last time we'll go through the list. In early summer, we met the blue jay, the smooth sumac, the red huckleberry, the high bush blueberry, the hare, the black birch, the sweet pignut hickory, the oxeye daisy, bluets, blackberry, the song sparrow, Indian grass, the white pine, and the pitch pine. In late summer, part 2, we met the white-footed mouse, Homo sapiens, and ground ivy, piper grass. We heard the mosquito. We saw ants, the cinnamon fern, the tall cinquefoil, and the tall anemone. In part 3, in early fall, we saw the woodchuck, the red maple, the creeping juniper, the ground nut, the white oak, bracken fern, eastern red spruce, partridge, old man mushroom, hay-scented fern, Pennsylvania sedge, bird's foot violet, white birch, cattail, sandbar willow, skaters or water bugs, tadpoles, and blue flag. And those tadpoles, by the way, were of the bullfrog, we later learned. In part 4, late fall, we had the dogwood, the red squirrel, the walleye, the yellow perch, and the common shiner, and the mallard duck. In part 5, or early winter, we saw the nighthawk, and we heard and saw the silhouettes of Canada geese flying over. In midwinter, we had only one new species, the eastern hemlock. In part 7, or late winter, we saw the red fox, the mink, and the black-capped chickadee. In part 8, or spring, we heard a fly, but did not really see one. We saw the ruby-throated hummingbird, the wild strawberry, the pasture rose, and the screech owl, the wood thrush, and the bullfrog. In part 9, or the following early summer, we saw the brown thrasher, the spotted salamander, the whippoorwill, and we saw the eggs of the mud turtle. In part 10, or late summer, we didn't add any new species. In part 11, we added the loon and the wild apple tree. And, let's see, since part 11, in the alternate playthrough, I did add a few more things. I came across one new entry for the red maple, but we already had that one on our list. I did add a new fern, the royal fern, and the St. John's wort. And there was also a new entry for the early goldenrod, a species we'd already discovered. We hear the spring peepers, which we've heard a few times through the game, but we haven't seen them. And I found the smooth yellow violet during that playthrough, out in the woods, let's see, over by the, sort of between the railroad tracks and the pond. And that was Viola pennsylvanica. So smooth yellow violet is a new flower species we could add. And let's see. For the smooth yellow violet, I wanted to just share the journal passage that we came across there. The smooth yellow violet, I have watered the red huckleberry, the sand cherry, and the nettle tree, the red pine and the black ash, the white grape and the yellow violet, which might have withered else in dry seasons. Also, when you're walking along the railroad tracks, you can find burned trees all over the place, which makes sense, as sparks flying off of the train as they pass by on the tracks would probably start ground fires and burn trees in the area. There's lots of burned trees along the railroad track. When you look at them, the entry says, if any part of Walden was burned, though I burned it myself by accident, I grieved with a grief that lasted longer and was more inconsolable than that of the proprietors. If we look at our journal, I did find that if you, there is a way that you can sort of skip through the seasons, so I can go from early summer to late summer, to early fall, to late fall. And we can kind of skip through faster that way. So if we jump forward into the later years, we can see, you know, a few entries that were added even after part 11 before I started that alternate playthrough. So I'll read through these ones real quick. So I can't remember exactly the one that we left off on, but we'll start with the beginning of the page here. I know we saw the wild apples already, but I'll read from the beginning of page 117. So the time for wild apples is the last of October and the 1st of November. I make a great account of these fruits, wild flavors of the muse, vivacious and inspiriting. I did not read books the first summer. I hoed beans. So you get that entry when you look at the hoe next to the bean field. Sometimes you will see many small red maples in a swamp, turned quite crimson when all other trees around are still perfectly green, and the former appears so much the brighter for it. So this is the alternate red maple entry I mentioned. I wonder what the world is doing now. I have not heard so much as a locust over the sweet fern these 3 hours. So this was for the royal fern, and the royal fern grows from the ground, like the cinnamon fern, and is probably more similar to the cinnamon fern than the bracken fern. It doesn't stand up on a stalk like the bracken fern, but grows from the ground and is a bit bushier. It just doesn't have those cinnamon stick-looking things like the cinnamon fern, right? The sport of digging bait is nearly equal to that of catching the fish. I would advise you to set in the spade down yonder among the ground nuts where you see the johnswort waving. That's when we found the johnswort, which was one of 2 new flower species. The tall, rough goldenrod makes a thicket higher than my head. What a change there will be in a few years. This little forest of goldenrod giving way to a forest of pines. And that was the alternate entry for the goldenrod. Our whole life is startlingly moral. There is never an instant's truce between virtue and vice. Goodness is the only investment that never fails. This further experience also I gained. So this was an arrowhead a little bit farther up from the bean field on the trail to Emerson's. This further experience also I gained. I said to myself, I will not plant beans and corn with so much industry another summer, but such seeds, if the seed is not lost, as sincerity, truth, simplicity, faith, innocence, and the like, and see if they will not grow in this soil. Every blade in the field, every leaf in the forest lays down its life and its season as beautifully as it was taken up. And finally, in most plants, the corolla or calyx is the part which attains the highest color and is the most attractive. In many, it is the seed vessel or fruit. In others, as the red maple, the leaves which will redden in the autumn. So that's as far as our journal has made it. As I said, even after leaving this even after this portion of the game, since that alternate playthrough, I was able to find a couple more things we would be able to add to the journal. The entry I read about burned trees and the smooth yellow violet, and I like to think there's a lot more plants and animals out there that I still hadn't discovered. Maybe more arrowheads if we went through the game more inspired, but you get a very good sampling in the playthrough that we've done. If you have followed along through any of this, I would absolutely love for you to share in the comments what passages from Walden, what species, or any other discoveries you have made that weren't covered in this video, and give me an idea of what I'm missing and what I need to go back out there and find when I replay. But that is all that we're going to cover for this stream of Walden. So it's been a lot of fun playing through the game, and being able to share some of my knowledge and be able to discover new things as we went through. So I'm going to end this by leaving Walden Pond and look at sort of the quote-unquote true ending of the game.
I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me that I had several more lives to live, and could not spare any more time for that one. I learned this, at least, by my experiment. In proportion as one simplifies their life, the laws of the universe will appear less complex, and solitude will not be solitude, nor poverty poverty, nor weakness weakness.